most startup founders, me included, prefer life in the $3 to $8 million of ARR than in the life before $1 million of ARR. Today, we are going to talk about a question that's always on people's minds on their first years of startup life, which is, does startup life get easier? The short answer is it does get easier. Startup gets easier when you have a role, a person that's not you for every function in your company. And that usually involves about at least 15 to 20 full-timers in your company. And so it could take a while to get to that point. In the early days of your startup, you are doing product engineering, HR, legal, finance, payroll, CFO, CEO, CRO, sales, marketing, the list goes on. And when there is a separate person besides you for every one of those functions, you technically don't have a real job. You don't actually do any concrete work. Your job is that of a coordinator or a conductor. Being a conductor, because you have done every job in the past, it does get easier to coordinate and conduct. You kind of know why that job exists. In what ways does it line up to the overall goal? And that is probably a reason that you want to do every job in the beginning. So treat that process almost as a feature instead of a bug. If you don't do that job, you never really know what is the essence of that job, what's the essence of that role, what's the one KPI that you want the person fulfilling that job to be focused on. If you like this kind of video, please subscribe. And by the way, one of my goals for 2026 is to get to 100 subscribers. We are at 88 right now, and so just 12 more. So if you like this kind of video, please do me a favor and subscribe. That will help me or motivate me to continue to make these videos, which is telling about the startup world through examples. The other reason that startup does get easier is that if you are not burning money, and that depends on the person. For me, if the company is profitable or not losing money or cash flow positive, it is infinitely better than a company that is burning money and has a runway. And that is probably the most important reason that it got easier as time goes on. If you can get the company to be profitable and it has a real impact on your psychology. Because if you're playing a game in which there's no ending, there's no clock winding down, and you are profitable, then you are by definition winning at all times. You cannot lose at that point. So when the company is profitable or cash flow positive, then you're not worried about the existentialist part of the company. Meaning that the thing you created, the thing you put your heart and soul for 2 or 3 years is not going to go away. And so when you live on this feeling of your company could go away at any time, or whether the things you do have any meaning and whether it will lead to anything, then it's a real pressure. It's the invisible stress that could kind of slowly rot from within. When you get rid of it, happiness is a lot of times getting rid of the things that's causing you pain. Then you are way happier. Your happiness level can go from below 5 to above 5 all of a sudden on a 10-point scale. Although the startup life gets easier, it's not how you think. So one thing that is not how you think is you're gonna start worrying about growth. I have this equation that is survivability is greater than internal rate of return, IRR, which is greater than cash and cash, which is you're amazingly profitable. And startup gets easier when you move from survivability to the IRR phase. But IRR is about growth. You're going to replace the stress of survivability with the stress of growth. When your rate of growth is below 50%, even if you're in the single $1 million of ARR, you are wondering, is this company worth anything? If you are triple, double, all the kudos to you. But it's really hard to do that unless you hit something really big. So most people are growing at like 40 to 80% during that time. And if your company is not growing fast enough, you will worry about growth. Growth will be much harder when you get into the millions of ARR. And growth has two kind of headwinds. The one headwind is the market could be more and more saturated, especially if your market is not that big to begin with. The second headwind is churn. Churn is a real thing when you get into the single $1 million of ARR. That's because with a certain level of churn, you have to do way more new ARR to make up for that churn in order to grow at a decent rate. Instead of worrying about running out of money, you start worrying about how can I grow at the same rate that I used to grow. When I was in YC, we were growing 60% week over week. It's like, oh, great job. Congratulations. Well, now we would love to grow at 6% month over month. And 6% month over month is like doubling that year. And that's actually really good if you are doing it without burning money, if you're doing it profitably. Like, that's amazing startup. You are set if you're growing at that rate. The second thing that is a headwind to the company, that you replace the part in which about survivability with this part, which is about people. You realize even if you do more sales, even if you code more, even if you do more marketing, your personal effort doesn't really change the course of the company. And because of the number of people in your company, the number of interactions and relationships within the company is an N square operation. Everyone interacts with each other. That's an N square problem. So the number of problems among the people about morale, about growth, and about just interpersonal relationships will grow exponentially. Now, this is not a problem in our company, but you will worry about, what if people leave? What if a job gets not fulfilled? And what if so-and-so don't get along with each other? And their motivation, their morale. And there's a saying that growth solves all problems, because when the growth is happening, everyone has just so much more excitement about the future of the company. There will be so much work to do that kind of like they're drawn in business. So the goal of a startup founder in this second phase is to optimize for growth. And that is from 3 million to about 10 million. Focus on growth. Don't focus on growth at the expense of future growth, but pay more attention to growth, and especially watch out for churn. Now, there is a noticeable difference between $1 million of ARR, $3 million of ARR, $5 million of ARR, and $10 million of ARR. At $1 million ARR, people think, like you made it. No, you haven't made it. But yes, it's a real accomplishment. It feels like there is something. At $3 million ARR, you most likely will get into this thing called the death of plateau, which is you're growing, but you're not growing that fast. And that's because you probably were using founder-led sales. You probably don't have your pricing structure right. You probably have too much churn because you focus on 2 entry-level customers, or you haven't really put into a process that is scalable. Founder level sales is not scalable. Hiring more AEs is scalable. But in order to hire AEs, you need to create a culture and a process to train those AEs. If you're doing kind of sales outreach or cold outreach, you need sales enablement team. And that team usually is either coming out of your AEs or coming out of yourself. You need a process on what to do when you call them, when to do them, how you do them, how to present yourself in the conferences. So at $3 to $10 million ARR, even 3 to 6, that's when you need the early stages of a true sales motion. So you replace this worry about survivability into this worry about, there is actually a lot of work to create this sales enablement team and build up a true sales team. And you're going to feel differently at 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, and 10 million. I think you're going to feel most dramatically at $10 million ARR. Like once you cross the 10 million, congratulations, you have truly a legit company. At that point, it's not invincible, but you basically made it. That's my opinion. At 3 million, you're still shaky. At 5 million, you're like, okay, in order to get to 5 million, most likely you have built a pretty good sales motion. It's not elite, but it's good enough to get you 5 million, because it's very hard for founder-led sales to scale up to 5 million. So if you can get to 5 million, you most likely indicates that you have built some kind of a non-founder sales motion. I hope that makes sense. So let's give a couple analogies to illustrate the point, both the good and the bad. So one analogy I will give is the startup life in the $3 to $5 million of ARR. It's almost like junior year in college. You have passed the freshman and sophomore year, kind of like not knowing what's going on, still learning, trying to look up to the upperclassmen. You still are wondering what you should major in and how do you form your study habits. By the junior year, you probably have a major, you know what to focus on, and you get most of the study habits done. Is it easier? Yes, it's easier in the way that if you will go back to freshman and sophomore year, you probably in a much better position to do well in those 2 years. That's what I mean. It's easier. The same kind of bewilderment and confusion and not knowing what to do that happened in your freshman year, you kind of figure it out. You kind of travel the maze by the time you hit your junior year and senior year. On the other hand, you are replaced with another thing, applying to jobs. And at that thing, you are still like a newbie. You're still a noob. And that thing, applying for jobs, internship, interviewing, lead coding, that's the equivalent of growth. You need to keep the growth. And that's the analogous to keeping a high growth rate in the company. So you replace the basics. You know the basics. It does get easier. You know the study habits. You know how to like crack your 101 exams. You know how to do that, but you have a different problem, which is figuring out how to enter the workforce. And that is about how do you become a true $10 million company, that inflection point. How do you cross that? So the other analogy about does the startup life get easier is the use of workouts, muscle development. In the early days, you're going to be sore. You don't see the body definition. You are going to feel like this is so difficult. I'm grinding really hard and I don't see a future. Every rep, every day is a grind and you don't want to wake up early in the day to work out. After about half a year or even a few months of working out, if you were to go back to the same weights that you lift when you first started, you're going to feel it's really easy. So the startup life get easier if you were trying to do the same thing that you used to do. Now, when I'm talking about this, some audience might feel like, no, that's not true. In the early days of a startup, even if you were to start all over again, you still could not find that product market fit. And that is hella stressful. That I agree. So in that world, this analogy may not be a great analogy, but in terms of the motions of like, should I do product or engineering or sales and marketing? Should I do, like outreach and so on? You know these tricks. You know, okay, I know my routine of alternating shoulders and chest workout, squats, get the upper body and the squats at the same time to maximize your throughput. You know the tricks and you can just lift more. You have the muscle and the mental stamina to know that, oh, that pain was normal. That confusion about is this worth it or is this approach gonna give me any results? That is a normal feeling. You get used to it. You kind of get more used to the pain at this stage. And even if it's the same pain, you're like, okay, I can endure it. You have a higher tolerance for pain. And that is the analogy of muscle development. So in summary, most startup founders, me included, prefer life in the $3 to $8 million of ARR than in the life before $1 million of ARR. And I do think that when you hit the 10 million ARR or beyond, you're going to feel great. You may still have a growth problem, but at least the company is worth something and definitely maintainable. The startup is a lot more invisible. They are here to survive. And 3 to 8 is a second level of stress because if you're not careful, it could dip. But if you are good, if you are still working hard, you will break through the $10 million. So I hope this is useful, especially if you are pre-$1 million ARR. Yes, you probably feel a lot of pain. You probably feel, is this gonna ever work? If you're gonna ever hit product market fit, and will things get easier? It will get easier. You're gonna hire more people. You're gonna delegate a lot of the things you're currently doing to other people. You're gonna replace it with different problems. And I hope that these problems are less painful than your current problems if you are in the pre-$1 million ARR. I hope that makes sense. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this kind of video, please subscribe and hit the like button. I will do more videos on this from my personal experience. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day. Bye-bye.